At the turn of the millennium, Toys R Us stood at the top of the world. For kids, it wasn't just a store, it was a wonderland. Bright colors, long aisles, shelves packed with every dream imaginable. The smell of plastic, new boxes, and endless imagination. For parents, it was the symbol of joy, nostalgia, and the sound of childhood itself. Every commercial, every jingle, every smiling giraffe reminded them of simpler times. But while kids were running through aisles holding action figures and dolls, a new kind of store was being born. One that had no aisles, no jingles, and no smiling giraffes. It lived inside a glowing computer screen. And the executives at Toys R Us didn't see the danger until it was too late. This is the story of how the world's most beloved toy empire handed its future and billions of dollars to Amazon and never recovered. Welcome to Missed Billions Explained, where we uncover the biggest business failures, billion-dollar mistakes, and how the mighty fall. If you love stories of corporate pride, bad deals, and digital revolutions, hit subscribe, because today we're exploring how Toys R Us helped build their own killer. To understand the fall, you need to remember the magic. In the 1980s and 90s, Toys R Us was the place. For millions of kids, it was paradise. Endless aisles of color, the smell of new plastic, and that iconic jingle, "I don't want to grow up, I'm a Toys R Us kid." They sold dreams in boxes. Every Christmas season, they became the center of childhood. At its peak, Toys R Us operated more than 1,400 stores worldwide and was generating over $11 billion in yearly revenue. Their mascot, Geoffrey the Giraffe, was more famous than some presidents. But behind the magic, something was changing, slowly, invisibly. A new kind of store had appeared, one without aisles, rent, or smiling cashiers. It lived inside a glowing computer screen, and the executives at Toys R Us didn't see the danger until it was too late. By the late 1990s, the dot-com boom was in full swing. Online shopping was clunky but exciting. Suddenly, you could buy a toy from your living room and have it delivered straight to your door. No crowds, no chaos, just a click. But the leadership at Toys R Us saw it differently. They were traditional retail royalty. They had warehouses, trucks, real estate, and decades of dominance. They thought the internet was a fad, a side experiment for tech people, not toy sellers. They believed parents would always want to walk through stores with their children, to touch the toys, feel the energy, and experience the magic in person. So while upstarts like Amazon were quietly building the digital future, Toys R Us kept investing in brick, mortar, and television ads. Then came Christmas 1999, a disaster. Thousands of orders from their website went unfulfilled. Parents were furious, kids disappointed, and the brand's reputation took a hit. Inside the boardrooms, panic set in. The executives realized something they'd been avoiding. They didn't understand e-commerce. And instead of learning it, they made a fateful choice. They decided to outsource it. In 2000, Toys R Us struck what seemed like a genius deal. They signed a 10-year exclusive partnership with Amazon worth $50 million per year. The plan was simple. Amazon would run the website, logistics, and online systems. Toys R Us would provide the products, the inventory, and the brand name. It sounded perfect, a dream alliance between tradition and technology. But in reality, Toys R Us wasn't making a partnership. They were handing over their future to the one company destined to replace them. At first, things looked great. The partnership exploded with success. Toys R Us became one of Amazon's most visible and profitable stores. Orders rolled in, the brand looked modern again, and executives celebrated. But deep inside Amazon's offices, Jeff Bezos and his team were studying every detail. They learned how toys were sold, when demand spiked, how customers behaved, what products kids loved most, and how seasonal logistics worked. Toys R Us had given them access to priceless data, the kind that builds empires. Then came the turning point. Despite their exclusive deal, Amazon began quietly allowing other toy retailers to sell on its marketplace. At first, they said it was temporary, a holiday overflow. Then it became seasonal. Then it became permanent. Suddenly, the Toys R Us section on Amazon wasn't so exclusive anymore. They were surrounded by competitors selling the same toys, often for less. Executives at Toys R Us were furious. They accused Amazon of betrayal and filed a lawsuit for breach of contract. But while the lawyers argued, Amazon evolved. They turned a small online bookstore into a global marketplace. They took what they learned from Toys R Us and applied it to everything: books, electronics, clothes, and yes, toys.
Amazon didn't just take their sales, they absorbed their DNA. In 2006, Toys R Us technically won the case. They received $51 million in damages and ended the partnership. But it was a victory written in invisible ink, because by then, Amazon had already become unstoppable. They had mastered supply chains, customer behavior, and logistics. They had turned shopping online into a daily habit. They had built the infrastructure that Toys R Us should have built themselves. And while Amazon was expanding, Toys R Us was starting from scratch, again. When they finally tried to rebuild their own website, the world had moved on. Parents didn't shop for toys online anymore. They simply shopped on Amazon. The student had become the master, and the teacher was irrelevant. Still, Toys R Us refused to believe the end was near. They invested in store redesigns, opened flagship locations, and tried to modernize the in-person experience. But e-commerce wasn't just another sales channel. It had become the heartbeat of retail, and Toys R Us was stuck in the old rhythm. They focused on nostalgia, believing loyalty would save them. But brand loyalty fades fast when convenience wins. Meanwhile, Amazon was learning faster than ever. They didn't just sell toys, they sold time, comfort, and simplicity. That's what people really wanted. By the 2010s, Toys R Us was crumbling under massive debt and dwindling sales. Their stores, once bursting with laughter, became quiet. Rows of empty shelves, fewer lights, a ghost of what once was. In 2017, after 70 years of joy, Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy. The news hit hard. Generations who'd grown up in those aisles suddenly realized their childhood playground was gone. Parents who once took their kids there now walked through going out of business sales. The mascot, Jeffrey the giraffe, became a symbol of loss. A company built on smiles ended in silence. But what if they had done it differently? What if, instead of paying Amazon, they had used that money to build their own online empire? They had everything they needed: brand trust, supply chain power, and retail reach. Imagine Toys R Us creating their own fulfillment centers, their own delivery systems, their own online shopping experience before Amazon perfected it. They could have built an empire of fun in the digital world, combining nostalgia with innovation. They could have been the Amazon of toys. But comfort is the enemy of innovation, and Toys R Us was comfortable, too comfortable. They believed their stores were irreplaceable. They believed their name was enough, and that belief became their downfall. Because the moment you stop adapting, the market moves without you. Toys R Us didn't fail because they were out of ideas. They failed because they outsourced the very thing they needed to learn. They thought hiring a partner was safer than changing themselves. But in business, you can't outsource your evolution. You can't rent innovation, and you can't buy time. Every empire falls for the same reason: the illusion that the past guarantees the future. Blockbuster believed in late fees. Kodak believed in film. Nokia believed in keyboards. And Toys R Us believed in stores. All of them were right until the world changed. When Toys R Us disappeared,
It wasn't just a company that died. It was an era. The smell of new toys, the aisles of dreams, the magic of being a kid in a world built for you. And maybe that's the saddest part. Not that they lost billions, but that they lost what they stood for. The wonder of childhood replaced by a buy now button. The world moved on, the magic went online, and the giraffe stayed behind. Thanks for watching Missed Billions Explained. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and tell us which billion-dollar mistake you want to see next. Because somewhere out there, another company is signing a deal that looks smart today and will look tragic tomorrow.